SpaceMobile podcast.
We just basically from your phone be seamless. Regardless of where you are, we don't want the user even to know that it's connected by satellite. Listen, the opportunity that we have is very, very, very large.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining this ad hoc space at 11 o'clock. I'm going to try to keep this somewhat short, but I always say that at the beginning of these things and then they always go over pretty long. But I am pretty tired. Yesterday I was up late, and this was part of the call, I guess, for this morning when I had tweeted out that I had dreamed that the stock price was going to break 124. Yesterday I was up late. I think it was until 1 a.m. And one of the things about investing is that you can fill your time pretty easily because there's always a insurmountable like wall of opportunity where and this is the one of the like positive things about investing, but also one of the things that can really drain you as well is that especially when I was working professionally, you always thought that if I spend additional time and try to learn more about a particular position or get some type of edge, like a funny story, I used to, when I was in the hedge fund industry, and I remember there was one year where I was always looking at my phone and looking at my Bloomberg app, just checking to see if news was going to break. Cause I covered a lot of event-driven situations, and for M&A, like you're always looking for rumors, whether that's from the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, or what have you. And if something was breaking, you wanted to be on top of it and get ready for it for the next morning or that evening. And so I'd always check. I just had this terrible habit, and my wife would always reprimand me for it, but I would always be checking my phone. And at one point, there was a time when Bloomberg, the IT people reached out to me and they asked me these questions like, hey, were you logged in? Were you checking news here and there? And through these questions, I started to figure out that they were seeing if I was scraping their news because they were afraid that maybe I was taking their information and using it or selling it or doing something else. And then I told them, no, I'm actually just a loser. I keep checking information at all hours of the night. And so, but yeah, that's the funny thing about investing is that if you want, you could basically work 24/7, which I'm kind of scared that there's these proposals to have the markets open 24/7. I think that would be really bad for mental health and for work-life balance. But yeah, when I do have some free time, I will take a look at whether it's situations that I'm involved in or new ideas. I'll spend some amount of time on that. And more recently, because the market has been doing well and there's all these other ideas that are floating around, people have been asking me to look at them and I'll take a look at some of them. But anyway, kind of, I guess, going off on a tangent, but last night I was up till 1 a.m. and then I decided to call it a night. And when I stay up that late, I oftentimes will not get good sleep and I have to wake up early because the kids get up early as well. And, it's my job to make breakfast and get them ready for school. But I think I woke up at like 3:50 a.m. because I used to cover Europe. And so I have this habit of waking up early for the European Open, even though I don't do anything with Europe now. But I woke up and I couldn't, it was hard for me to go back to sleep. So of course I checked news, which is bad because then you start, getting your brain working and it's hard to go back to sleep. And so I tried to put myself back to sleep. And then during one of these periods of, 20 minutes of sleep or 30 minutes of sleep, that's when I had this like vivid picture that, AST is going to break 124 today. And it was like very bizarre. And so that's when I finally did wake up. I think it was like 6:10 or 6:15 when I tweeted, but I was like, hey, you know what? This is kind of fun. I'll just tell people what happened. Like I dreamed that we would break 124 today. And so I tweeted that. And then I went back to sleep, or tried to. And then, of course, I got up at 6:50 and then did what I had to do. But it was kind of funny because over the course of the day, the stock was strong. And of course, various people were speculating, why is the stock strong? Well, maybe any number of catalysts we've talked about, which I'll cover later in this in the space, but any number of catalysts could be coming up. But one of them, which kind of stood out once, I forgot which SpaceMob person had found the FCC meeting, but the meeting between AT&T, Verizon, FirstNet, Dave Marshak of RKF, and then of course AST. They met with the FCC, and so that was a pretty important data point. And I tweeted it, and the stock didn't do anything. And I was like, "Hey guys, this is really important. You guys should pay attention. This is alpha." And I'll talk a bit more about it. But that meeting in of itself, given the back and forth between the company and the FCC, and of course the ending of the comment period in early October, like that was a telltale sign. Like we're pretty close to the end game for the U.S. Approval for U.S. market application, which is a huge deal, and I'll talk more about it later. But yeah, it was kind of fun just seeing the stock price kind of going back and forth. And today was a bit of a volatile day, especially with the Fed decision looming. And so the stock was strong, and then of course, like AST normally does, it sold off, came back down, and then it moved back up. And lo and behold, it got to 120, 121, 122, and I was like, no, really, it's going to happen? And it happened. It broke 124 today. So I think the high was 124.32, and it was funny because I'd come across the meme of Fat Vance dancing, and I think it was like 2 days ago. Someone had posted that meme of him dancing and saying like, "Oh, this is what happens when you get two sticks of 16 gigabyte RAM for really cheap," or something, and they had him dancing, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to take that because one day it's going to be useful." And of course, I didn't realize that it was going to be today, just 2 days later. So that was fun, and yeah, I think part of me doing this space is just to memorialize the fact that we've reached this all-time high. I mean, 124.32 intraday high, which is insane, and closing price of 121.23, an all-time high. And so when you take a step back and think about where we've come from, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like, of course, like some people, day to day, the stock price is down, it'll be up. Obviously, there's still some decent amount of volatility, but sometimes I have to remind people, like slap them around. It's like, hey, did you know that today the stock moved like 6 market caps worth of AST back in 2024? So chill out. Like it's we've come a long way, relatively speaking. Yeah, there's going to be some volatility. It's a feature, not a bug, and just get used to it. It's all right. Because we're at this point where, and Kook and I talked about it after the close today. We're at this point where a lot of the risk, a lot of things have been de-risked. And when he talked about this past weekend in his space about, if you have one satellite bricked or something bad happens, it's okay. The company can survive that. Like, it's actually, at some point, we should all prepare ourselves for one satellite or 2 satellites or whatever it is, like eventually not working. Hopefully not in the way that the company approaches, production and how they execute. I don't think that's a high likelihood, but it's possible. But that's not like a company ending type of, event versus if we had lost Blue Walker 3 during that period of uncertainty in the financial markets, that could have been an extinction type of event, or maybe not extinction, but definitely, the company would have been in a really tough spot and would have to raise money at really bad levels. And, I don't even want to think about it, but now we're at this point where a lot of things have been de-risked, and a lot of things near term, literally in the next few weeks, are going to be de-risked further. And so that's why I think the stock has continued to build a base, and you've got this tailwind of this administration wanting, space superiority. And I joke, I tweet like, "Hey, it's not that hard, guys. Just look at this," which is true. It's just like someone playing AI themes last year. You just buy these things and you just hold on to them. And it was funny because like there's this one Twitter account who's a hedge fund guy. His name is Century Old Egg Credit or something like that. But he had tweeted, "Oh, maybe I should write a short thesis on AST." And then I responded to him. I was like, "Yes, please bring it on." With the Montgomery Burns meme of him saying "excellent," but and then Kook kind of egged him on a little bit too, no pun intended. But then this guy was like, "Well, no, I'm not going to be short this thing. I'm actually going to be long." He's like, "I don't believe in this company, but I'm not dumb. I'm going to be long AST heading into the SpaceX IPO." And that was actually a change in tone. And that's something that I would expect, right? Because the hedge funds, I mean, for the smart guys who actually want to make money, even if you don't believe in something, the last thing you want to do is like short it, right? You don't want to short into a huge deluge of catalyst and tailwinds that are going to push a stock against you. And if you're really smart, if you can actually kind of get over your bias of I'm smarter than these retail guys, and I'm going to own this thing, or I'll figure out ways to justify owning it, then you actually go long and you make money, which it's pretty astounding. Like if you think about some of the short sellers over the years, whether it's Kerrisdale or I guess who is it? Gosh, I forget it. Lakeview Capital. I forget their name. Anthony Boza, or like any of these guys, right? Like they probably, like for, let's say Kerrisdale, for example, they wrote this long report and they made money. I think the stock went that day they put the report out. They probably shorted at an average of $10. Stock went down to like maybe 6 or 7. So they made like a decent amount of change. It was a one-time thing. They made money and they probably traded it around here or there and probably took a few crumbs here and there over the course of the years. So I remember like even after the Block 1 launch, they, of course, Bloomberg interviewed them as part of the seminal event. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we don't think this changes anything. We're short AST." And I remember reading that and I was just like, "Oh, come on, really? Like you guys are around still?" But I'm sure they probably made maybe $1-2 million, $3 million. I mean, they're not running a very big book. Their AUM is actually dwindled quite a bit. But I just sit there and think like, what would have happened if they or any of these bears, like for example, this guy, Philip Lyle, who works at SpaceX, he just continues to write. He's like a space enthusiast, but all he writes about is like negative shit on AST. Or Tim Farrar, anybody listening to Tim Farrar. I mean, there's a whole host of these people, and they've just been writing negative stuff about the company. Like Tim Farrar has not written one positive thing for 5 years. But all these guys, like, they've spent so much time and energy fighting this company, and the stock is like at $122. Like, they wasted so much of their life dedicated to putting like fear, uncertainty, doubt, trying to kneecap this company, and it failed. And like me and you, we spent, obviously more time than them. I don't know. Some of them are pretty crazy, but we have something to show for it. Like we've made a ton of money, but these guys, they spent so much time, like, there was a point. I'm at the age where if I spend too much time on Twitter, my eyes start hurting. Like that's what these guys are doing, and they have nothing to show for it, right? Like they spent so much. Tim Farrar talks about rent free. They spent so much time on it, and it was for nothing. And so sometimes I think about that, and I'm like, man, how shitty must that feel? You must be, it must be a really hollow feeling that you've dedicated precious time of your life, which is limited and it's very valuable, to spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt about this company, and you were wrong. And they continue to do that today, right? Like the free speech, this other guy, like I don't know. It's just, it's bizarre. But anyway, yeah. So today was pretty nuts. Like, the fact that we hit 124, like on one hand, I was really happy, and people were excited. On the other hand, it wasn't like the time when Verizon, when we signed the deal with Verizon and we were gapping up every day. Now it kind of feels like, oh yeah, that's what it should be doing. And then I'm like, oh, well, like tomorrow or next week, like I think we're going higher. So I don't, back in the day when there was, in 2022 and 2023, 2024, I mean, all those years, there was always this fear. And Kook is like, he still has this PTSD. Like he's like one of these guys who grew up during the Depression. Like he'll keep that mentality. And so when he sees the stock gap up or move up, he's always like, oh, he always has in the back of his mind, like he's afraid that it'll come back down. And so it's unclear if he's good at handling the move up. And so, but for me, and especially now, it's like back in 2022 and 2023, that happened for sure. Like the stock would move up and it was a trading vehicle, and then it'd give up everything and move down. And of course people, you'd have this like false dawn of, oh man, things have changed. It's re-rated. And then of course, no, it's back then we thought, oh, these catalysts like getting Blue Water 3 up, that's going to be a big unlock. No, the company was so early that it was a positive thing, but, and, obviously there was like a positive reaction, but it was short lived because, it was still early stage, and early stage companies, that trade in public markets, it can be tough. Right. And so it's not sustainable. Whereas now, there's so many actual things that are happening. And of course, like the company's generating revenue, and in this coming year, 2026 is going to be very big. Now we're experiencing what it feels like to be a more mature company, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, these positive catalysts happen and the stock sustains and it keeps like step functioning higher. Like that's how it's supposed to work. And so, so yeah, I think from a mental perspective, it probably for most of SpaceMob, it's a big adjustment, and I don't think it's something that it's probably going to take some time to get used to. But for me, I think I'm already there, where I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, like we're going to keep moving up, and I'm cool with that. So I did want to cover a few small things, and then we can get into some catalysts. And so one thing I wanted to talk about, and I try to avoid this, but I was like, I'll talk about it. But recently there's been like some political back and forth stuff on AST, and I just want to say, like, I'm a nice person. I do have political views, but I don't share them, and I try to be very apolitical on Twitter because people, and this is my MO, right? Like when I post stuff on Twitter, it's focused on investing, some life stuff. Like I'll share things that I find joy in sometimes, but I avoid politics because it's like this entire platform is full of politics. I don't want to, when people follow me and they're not looking for, I hope they're not looking for political advice or angle or view, because that's not what I'm about. Like for this specific platform and for what I'm doing and what I find joy in doing is investing and sharing ideas and talking about my experiences and helping people out if I can. Hopefully it's helping people out. But I avoid politics, right? And I know people have reached out to me from time to time, and sometimes I'll comment, like if something bad has happened, like when Charlie Kirk got murdered, I was like, man, that's really sad. Like people getting assassinated, that's not good. And then I got a bunch of blowback from people like, what about this person and that person? And it's like, I'm not a political figure, and that's not what I'm peddling, right? I'm just making a comment as a human. But it's like when people have asked me from time to time, like, hey, what about Palestine? Or what about Israel? Or what about, the recent stuff that's going on? And it's like, I'm not a politician. I don't spend a lot of time delving into politics. I actually, if anything, I've moved away from politics because it's just too exhausting. But it's almost like that. It's almost like, what was it? That comedy skit with, gosh, why am I forgetting his name? But it's a joke where everyone's like, oh, well, something bad happens, and then it's like, well, what would Ja Rules think? And it's like, who cares what Ja Rules thinks? Like, for me too, it's like, who cares what men thinks? Like, I'm not an expert. I don't follow current events closely enough to have an impactful opinion. And as someone who is of influence, it's not my job, nor do I desire to wield politics or try to influence people, right? Like, it's not, it's just something I avoid. And for me, like, whether it's for the companies I'm invested in, the friends that I've made, like, I just try to put politics aside. And for SpaceMob, like, there are people like we do have some like Twitter chats, and some other, there's other groups, like there's Discord and others. Like, one of the things that we all try to do is not talk politics. The only times like politics actually comes into discussion is if it impacts your investment, right? And so if there's policy or legislation, then yeah, you can talk a bit about that. But when it comes to people's opinions about politics, like, I avoid that stuff, because the last thing I want to do is like start flooding people with my opinions on politics. And it's like, if you seek that, first of all, like, again, I'm just one person with a very unique background and experience, and mine is very different than yours. And if you need political guidance from somebody else, then you're not doing it right. You got to think on your own. And so I think, like, for other people, if you're here to follow me, you're probably wanting to hear about AST SpaceMobile or T1 Energy or Bridger or some of these other investment ideas or new stuff, or I'm going to talk about warrants on Friday. And so if you want to do politics, like, go follow the talking heads. That's not me. So, and, people will try to make, because I have a lot of followers, like, people try to sometimes make me feel bad. They're like, hey, well, you should stand up, or you should do this or that. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do that, because that's not what people are following me for. If I became a pundit, then sure. But that's, and I'm not going to, sometimes I feel bad. And it's like, oh, maybe I should say something about this particular topic or another. But then I remind myself, like, I'm not here to peddle like certain views and make people feel awkward, or like they need to follow me, or like, oh, I need to agree with him, or I don't like that guy, like, he's, he just agrees with me. And that's one thing that, candidly, I think over the last 5 years, I've learned is that with SpaceMob, there's people from all walks of life, and I've learned to get along with everyone, right? And so, because it's like, we had this common interest, which is, it's almost like our kid, this company. And so we put politics aside and ideology aside, and sometimes we disagree. Sometimes it can get messy, but at the same time, we all come together. Like, we have this friendship, and it's bigger, it's beyond politics, right? And so, I respect people for their views, and not everybody's every view, but I just try to keep it tight into what I do, which is just investing. And so, I just wanted to talk about that. And I think, if there are people, and by the way, like, this is not people can express views that they want to, they're free to do that. I'm not the politics police. Like, if you are on Twitter doing investing and you want to have a political view and you want to go share it, then that's all, go ahead. That's fine. But there's probably a high chance that I'm not going to follow you, because that's I'm trying to get away from that. Like, that I'm one of the people on Twitter where it's like, hey, if there's a way to just eliminate politics, and like, one way to do that, for example, is to unfollow Elon Musk, because then it's like, oh, all of a sudden, like, there's not as much political stuff going on. But I try to follow just investment related accounts or accounts of interest. But yeah, that's up to you, and you can curate like who you want, and that's fine. And I'm not here to push political views on anybody. I hope people don't feel that way. And when I use, like, today, JD Vance dancing, it's not as if like I'm a huge fan of him or I hate him, any of those things. I just thought the meme was funny. So anyway, but that's my little blurb on politics. Some people have asked me about, why aren't you 100% AST SpaceMobile? Why do you talk about other investment ideas? And it's just my personal preference. Like, AST, I've told people in the past, like, it's probably 85% or more of my public securities portfolio. And so, but I'm an investor by heart, and that was my career. And so I've got to keep my mind fresh. And when there's interesting stuff out there, like I'll go research it, share those ideas as well. And so, yeah, it's just part of my DNA, and it's fun. Like maybe you're not going to find the next ASTS, but you might find some interesting ideas. And then I like to share those. And so hopefully those are good ideas. Sometimes they don't work out, but one thing I've learned though is, I run a very concentrated portfolio. So I only have, maybe 5, 6, 7 ideas of size. And then I might have some trades here and there, but excuse me. But one good thing about that is if you're sometimes like there can be a dearth of news, or like on ASTS, some people fall into this trap of if you're 100% all in on ASTS, and the stock is up, then people are like, oh, why is the stock up? Or if it's low, heaven forbid the stock is down. Oh my gosh, why is it down? Why is it doing this? Like, why are the algos killing me? And why is God forsaken me? It's like, no, it's just part of market volatility. It's okay. And sometimes, like, if you have a few other positions that you follow, then that you don't feel this, the gravity of just one position, where it's like, it's almost like a distraction. Like you have these other things that you're following as well. And so, if AST is down, making something up, like if it's down 5-6%, and it's pretty brutal, but then this other position's up a few percent, then mentally you can kind of get yourself to this point where you're like, oh, there's something positive going on, and I'll focus on that. I'm not really worried about AST because I know it's volatile and it may move for no reason. And so having a few other ideas can help mentally. And if anything, like I've said, there are some people who are 100% concentration, which is totally fine. Like I'm not against that in any means. But sometimes you'll have these again, like these people who will, they'll watch every tick, and every tick has to be explained. And so sometimes it's good to have a distraction, and it doesn't have to be investing. Like, hey, you can go out and go fishing, go run, do other things. Like instead of just like being glued to your computer and watching the stock prices all day. But anyway, it's just part of who I am. Like I'm always looking at investment ideas and sharing them, and it just happens. Like there's quite a few interesting stuff, interesting ideas going on right now. So, which yeah, I enjoy. But anyway, going to the next topic, which is Catalyst. And so, and that was the headline of this space, which is, things are happening. It's happening. Right. And so I think the first big one that I wanted to talk about is this meeting with the FCC. And so for those that saw, I think it was January 23rd, the company AT&T, Verizon, FirstNet, and Dave Marshak, who's a consultant who's been doing work for the company, they all met with the FCC. And what was interesting about that meeting is that, you have all the key stakeholders of the U.S. that were there. And this comes after, the company, the comment period for the U.S. market application for supplemental coverage from space, that comment period ended, I think it was like October 6th. And then there was like a short reply period and then response to that. Maybe it was like up until the second week of October. But I think and there's nothing typical, but usually you might have, 2 to 3 month period where after the comments are closed, then you'll have a decision potentially. And of course, like it depends on how complicated that decision is. But timing wise, I was expecting that we would hear hear about our application sometime towards the end of January or the first half of February. And so we're kind of there. Right. And so that meeting was on top of a few other meetings that have happened, or letters or correspondence. But that's the type of meeting you want to see. Right. So you have the stakeholders involved. Everyone shows up. It's not just like AT&T separately or Verizon separately. Like they're there together, which is pretty crazy. We joke about, the fact that they're these two rivals are sharing the same toothbrush or underwear, but yeah, that's an important meeting. But it's important in the sense of, it kind of indicates like we're close to the end, right? Like maybe we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. The thing that you don't want to see in those meetings are, and I looked at, who the participants were. These were attorneys or, representatives, but not the actual principals. Like you didn't have John Stankey showing up or, senior executive showing up. But you had like, attorneys there and they're basically kind of wrapping things up in my mind. Right. And so those are the types of people you want in that meeting. If you had the CEO of Verizon and AT&T showing up for that meeting, that would be a really bad sign, right? Or not, I wouldn't say really bad sign, but it's not a good sign, right? Because when you have really senior people showing up for those meetings towards the end, that means like there's something wrong and things are not going the way you want. And so if Abel was there and Stanky and I apologize, I forget who, since there's a new CEO at Verizon, I forget his name. Let me just look at here. So Dan Schulman, if Dan Schulman was there, if those three guys were there, that would not be good, right? But you didn't have those guys there. You had attorneys and whatever else representatives, and so that's positive. It's very positive, right? And then today, after that letter was found by SpaceMob, there was a letter from AST to the FCC on some follow-up items about interference limits and that one seemed very much like here's a response to some of your requests, and it seemed like they were just tightening things up. So I think we're pretty much there. I mean, we might see a few more letters, and it could be as soon as tomorrow, it could be Friday, it could be next week, or it could be the week after, but we're pretty damn close, right? And so, but what does that mean? Like I was talking to Kook about this earlier, and it means that we will have, just like, by the way, like Starlink just got approved for their direct-to-device constellation. I guess it was like a week or two ago. And of course, everyone has seen Brendan Carr, his positive comments about wanting to speed and be supportive of American innovation around direct-to-device, like not only cutting red tape for approvals, but freeing up even more spectrum, which, by the way, like Starlink needs more spectrum for their solution to work. So obviously they went out and got some, but it looks like they're probably, sorry, I'm just drinking some water, but it looks like they're probably advocating to get more spectrum freed up, because, I think their solution is going to need it if they want to do broadband. But the fact that Chairman Carr is, pounding the table that, we want American leadership. He's talked about Starlink. He's talked about AST SpaceMobile. I mean, the writing's on the wall. Like the approval is coming. It's just a matter of, is it tomorrow? Is it Friday? Is it next week or the week after? Like we say, it's inevitable. And so that's going to be a huge watershed moment for the company, because for those that have been around since 2021, 2022, like around that time, there were just so many naysayers who doubted that we would get U.S. market access, right? And so that's really valuable. Like Starlink has that, Amazon Leo has that, and of course the legacy guys have that, but there's no one else who has that, and it's a long process. I mean, the company first filed its application, I think back in 2019, 2020, and so this is a long time coming, right? And so having that in hand, what does that do? It depends. Like if they give full approval, that then we can start chunking up satellites without getting special temporary authorities, which is the way that basically waivers, which is the way we've been doing it. But yeah, the FCC would approve a constellation of 248 satellites, and then like go ahead, go do it. And it's not just a matter of launching them, but then you can turn on commercial service, right? As long as you're not harming other people. And so that's very valuable. Like, just to give you an example, if the company, heaven forbid, fell on hard times, the fact that we have that that agreement, U.S. market access. So you could actually go sell that to somebody else, or someone would acquire you to then take over your slots. Of course, they couldn't do something that's totally different, but within the parameters of that grant, they could then start a constellation that had similar technologies and uses of frequencies and things like that. But that's really valuable, right? And so what I mentioned, when I had the conversation with Kook, it's like, okay, well, what if we get this approval? What does that mean? And candidly, like in terms of stock price, I couldn't tell you, and he couldn't either, because maybe the stock is up 20%, 30%, maybe it's flat, maybe it was expected, and maybe it like sells off a little bit. But over the long run, or over the medium and long term, I mean, it's a huge positive, right? Because it's a point of validation, and regulators around the world will look to it, right? Because the U.S. is the leader right now because of what the company's doing and what Starlink's doing. And so when people look at regulatory frameworks, they look for the U.S. as lead. And so once that happens, then I think the dam will break open where other regulators are like, oh, okay, so these guys have approval. That gives me a framework to evaluate this and eventually lead to approval for use in Europe, in Asia, Africa, wherever it is. And so that's a really big deal. And I think for naysayers, that's going to be a huge seminal event where it's like, oh, wow, they got it. And that could be a catalyst too for some of these funds. I know Fidelity has a small position, but it could be something where you have long-only managers who are waiting for the company to get validation from the FCC, to basically the go-ahead, right, to launch commercial service. And so that's where you might walk in one day and Fidelity, the portfolio manager there is like, okay, I want to buy a 5% position in the company, VWAP it over 3 weeks. And you'll have this period just like, we saw in 2024 where the stock like just keeps going up nonstop. And that's because like institutions are buying. I mean, the thing about Fidelity, for those that don't know, like they do have a limit. They can only buy up to 15% of a company's outstanding shares. But that's really big. Like if they have conviction in a company, they will go to 50, or it's not 15. They go to 14.9999% or whatever it is. But yeah, that could be a big unlock, or not could be. It should be a big unlock for probably a lot of institutions that are sitting on the sidelines who still think like, oh, this company's pre-revenue, and they don't have a U.S. commercial market access yet. And then when that happens, it's like, oh, the narrative completely changes, right? Because then it's like, wow, they actually got it done. The FCC is comfortable with the parameters in which they're operating and the technology, and it's happening. It's not a pipe dream anymore. So that is a very big catalyst. And when I think it was like a week ago, actually it wasn't a week ago, it was early. Was it? Yeah, maybe it was a week ago. Or no, it was the other day. And a week ago when I was like, oh, I'm adding torques, like just some speculative upside. I was adding in part because of that. And then of course, some of these other catalysts too. Right. And so for people that don't know, like I have a large core position that I just don't touch in the company. And then I do trade around some shares and some options as well. Most of that will happen in like retirement accounts because it's tax advantage. But I also do that in a cash account. But I do that not as if, when I because there were some people who were like, whoa, why are you buying at 120 or whatever, when I don't think I bought at 120. I think I bought like at 112 is the highest I've paid recently. And then like 101, 102, those areas. But yeah, it's like, oh, well, I'm playing some of these catalysts, right? Because of the great due diligence that SpaceMob has done, like we know that some of these things are coming up. And so I expect something positive to happen, right? And so those catalysts are, for example, like BB6, you've got a whole host of people that are following the satellite and, how much drag it's experiencing, because we've learned, and this is through due diligence, whether it was Blue Walker 3, And then, of course, Block 1 satellites, there's this pattern. I mean, it's not going to be perfect because these satellites are much bigger and they have a different unfolding mechanism, but there's some telltale signs to know when a satellite has unfolded, and if that's been successful, right? And CATSI did this in the early days for Blue Walker 3, where people were kind of, they were biting their nails, right? So we were all wondering if the satellite was okay, if it had detumbled meaning it's stable and it's in the proper orbit. It's not like, rolling over end over end or any of that stuff. And so that there is a way to kind of track these things. And in particular for the previous generation of satellites, there was, the initial unfold, which is in the bar configuration, where if you can imagine your left and right arms go out from your body, and that's the bar configuration. And then your arms, from there, the array unfolds in two directions, up and down. And so, but here for this, as we've speculated with Block 2, it'll just be one large arm that goes out and then it will unfold in one direction. So it's much simpler in design, and so prone to less risk of complications. But, we'll have to see how that looks in terms of, the data. And then once we see that, then you can apply that for future satellites, for Block 2 satellites, because they will follow the kind of same pattern. But yeah, that speculation is going on. I mean, BB6 should be unfolding relatively soon, or perhaps part of it is unfolded. There's been some speculation that, this satellite in particular has also a tail that has a solar array for extra power. I think there's some speculation that maybe that's happened, but the company is going to release it when it does, and we'll get a PR. And I'm not sure if they'll actually show video of it. They did show a little bit of it last time, but the unfolding mechanism for this current design is they want to keep it as proprietary as possible. So I'm not sure we'll see any video, but maybe we'll see a picture or two. But I would expect that to happen any moment. So that's exciting. And then of course we've got Bluebird 7 launch. That's going to happen no earlier than the end of February. And so just want to remind people in space speak, no earlier means that the best date something will go is at that set time. And so when they say no earlier than the end of February, it could be February 26, 27. But then it's also it's likely to happen sometime thereafter. So it could be March 1st, March 2nd, March 3rd. As we know, like launches are impacted by weather, because you want to have optimal conditions, especially for launching, satellites that are lower, that are bigger in size and of course that are worth more to your constellation. You want to be very careful. The reason why Starlink doesn't do that, or SpaceX doesn't do that, is that they're checking up like batches and batches of these things, and so the standard of when they will launch, whether the impact of weather or solar flares or things like that, it's not as much of a consideration. But for us it is. And so, I would expect that we'll launch maybe, if we're lucky, by the end of February, but it's probably going to be really early March for BB7. And then the other things to look out for are batch 1 and batch 2, which are the pair of 3s that will go up on Falcon 9. And sorry, I forgot to mention BB7. Most of you guys know this, but will be going up on Blue Origin New Glenn 3, which will be interesting because that's a new vehicle. They're reusing the booster Never Tell Me the Odds, and so part of the Blue Origin program is to demonstrate and prove that they can reuse these boosters, have a pretty quick turnaround time, and be successful doing that. And so this is going to be a very important mission for them, and of course important for us. And then we should at some point see the shipment of 2 batches of 3 Bluebirds down to Florida, and there's a number of theories of why that's taking longer than expected. The most visible part would be that there's quite a bit of backup down at the Cape. You've got processing with the manned Falcon 9 mission that's going to the space station, and then you've got Starship. They're preparing to launch that as well, and so processing payloads. You wouldn't send down satellites if there weren't, excuse me, if the processing facilities were not ready to handle those. And so and I think obviously the company wants to avoid saying, well, we're ready, but SpaceX is not ready, or vice versa. Maybe we aren't ready, but they're ready. But you never want to throw your launch provider into the bus. And so, but I expect that to happen soon. And then of course, like we've got more Golden Dome stuff that could be coming. I sent out this meme today about the eventuality of Nancy Pelosi and Timmy Tuberville. For our foreign listeners, these are two U.S. senators. Pelosi, I think her reputation precedes her. She's probably one of the best traders of all time, probably helped by the fact that she has inside information. As a politician in the U.S., we don't have proper rules and controls in place to keep politicians from using their positions of privilege to using that to profit. And so, there are these like investment services that follow the trades of politicians, which these politicians, like, they'll report their trades, but it's on a delayed basis. And so you'll find out they might have a new position in a company, but it might be weeks. In some cases, this one politician, I think it was like in a news article today, she didn't disclose her trade until 100 days later, and she got slapped a fine of like a few $100. But anyway, but yeah, Nancy Pelosi, and then Tommy Tuberville, who was a former coach at University of Alabama. He's a senator from Alabama, but he also has this penchant for very profitable trades. But I pointed that out as kind of a joke, but it's actually, I would expect we probably start seeing some politicians buy some space names, whether it's AST or Rocket Lab or some of these other names, just given all the movement around Golden Dome, the NDAA, and then of course, like the various legislation that's being pushed around and money being granted. I would not be surprised to see some senators and representatives in the House like pick up positions in AST. I'd be shocked, quite candidly. I think it would be too hard for any of them to not have that itchy trigger finger and get involved. And so I think we should probably expect that in the coming few months, especially after the FCC, grants U.S. market application. And there's probably, some politicians who are who see that coming down the pike and are like, hey, I'm going to buy in front of that. So, I think one thing that, I try to remind people is that, and this is kind of related to politics, it's like, this administration is focused on space. They want Golden Dome to be a reality before Trump leaves office. And so there's a ton of tailwinds, right? And actually, let me see. One of our SpaceMob guys who works at a hedge fund shared this with me today, which I'm going to tweet out later. But it's there's this study, I think McKinsey and Goldman Sachs did this study where they think the global space economy will be worth $1.8 trillion by 2035, up from $630 billion in 2023. And so, it's kind of interesting because I think, as most of us know, for the last several years, space was, aside from SpaceX, which was deemed the only, serious company that was doing anything of note. All these other companies were kind of just too early in the stage of development, or space is too small. It's very niche, but it's becoming mainstream. And there are real investment dollars that are, it's happening now, right? Like you can tell the fact that, Trump signed the executive order for space superiority. I think it was like, I go back, but I think it was like the second or third week of December that came out. And I could probably put an index together of all the space names, but at that time, for example, AST was at $65 because I remember vividly, like the stock had pulled back and then he signed the executive order. And of course, it was pretty volatile. It was interesting. We actually have had this, I've talked about this before, but we moved away from these like three peaks, like three impulse moves, to now we're just for the technical guys out there, we're on this like channel all the way up. It's actually, if you look at the early December, we've made higher highs and higher lows, right? And so since that point in time, if you look at like any other space names, just look at the other space proxy, and I've mentioned this before, like Rocket Lab and AST, basically, not all the time, but they do trade on top of one another. Like if AST is positive for the day and Rocket Lab's down, and AST stays positive, then Rocket Lab will eventually kind of, recover, and vice versa. If AST is having a bad day, but Rocket Lab got upgraded, AST will eventually recover too. Or if one goes down, then the other one kind of goes down. And that's like day to day, but then over like a longer time period, obviously those two stocks have the performance has differed a bit, but they actually do trade somewhat in line. And so when you look at the space industry and kind of newer space companies, I kind of view AST and Rocket Lab as the kind of the two big proxies of the sector. Of course, other companies have performed pretty well too, but since that December, the executive order for space superiority, I mean, Rocket Lab was in the 50s. Now it's like at 89. It's been flirting with 100. I mean, it did touch 100. But I think for some of these short sellers, and I've mentioned this before, like, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be short names. However, depending on, you can debate like the level of quality of the names, but you don't want to short a sector that is thematically the place to be, right? And that's space, and that's going to be true heading into the SpaceX IPO. And then what happens after that IPO is unclear, but the demand is going to be there for the entire sector. And so for people like I see Tut Capital out there, for guys like Valuations who shorted the company, I think. Looking at his post, I think he was short at 50 at some point, and maybe he was short at 70. Like, he's down big, right? And you don't. I mean, it's one thing to kind of pick at a company in particular, but when the secular trends are so powerful, you just don't want to be short those names. And then on the flip side, like, you actually want to be long. And so I mentioned that one Twitter account who was saying he was skeptical of the company. He called it AST Mobile or something. And then Kook was like, well, are you going to short it? And he was like, no, I'm going to go long because I'm like, that's the trade. You need to be long AST and some of these other companies heading into the SpaceX IPO. And this is what I was talking about before, where it's like the smart guys to understand how to make money and trade, they will be long. And that's going to be the consensus trade, right? And so, and that's why I tell people over the last few weeks, like, have a plan, right? When the bankers, I think Musk was trying to pull the IPO forward to like June because it's going to line up with some, I don't remember. It's like some planetary things, but, and his birthday. So he wants to have that happen in June, which is actually pretty quick because, they're going to have to file the S1, the IPO prospectus, and then go through an SEC review. My guess is that the SEC is going to try to push that through pretty quickly, just given how special, Musk is and how close he is to the administration. So maybe it happens in June, but if not, like, we're probably looking at July. And then if it doesn't happen in July, I mean, I think this company has the pull to still to do a successful IPO in August, but you typically want to stay away from an August and September offering because people are away for a holiday. But yeah, that's why I think, making sure that you have a plan because, Kevin Mack had talked about this before, but, and I agree with him, the ingredients for AST to become an S rank in anime, there's this idea, you can pick any number of series, whether it's like One Punch Man or Solo Leveling, but there's this schema for ranking heroes and also for evil guys, which is like C rank is a low, there's D rank is low, C, B, A. If you're A rank hero, like, that's really high. But then there's like the exceptional ones where there might be, I don't know, like 200 A rank heroes who have these different capabilities, but S rank, there might be just 10 in the world, right? And so when Mac was talking about this idea that AST could achieve S rank in terms of a cult stock, and that's not to be confused with like something bad, but something that's like for Palantir or Tesla, where the company has like this halo effect where people want to own it. They believe in the mission, and the company is doing, extraordinary things. And it's not, valuation isn't just predicated on the next 1, 2, 3 years, but it's like on the potential of what the company can do. Right. So, and AST fits that in spades, right? Where you have this communications platform that is going to deliver commercial service, broadband data to any 3G PPV device, whether that's a mobile phone, a drone, a computer, car, any device that can work on a cellular network. But then you also have these use cases of, on the military side. So sensing, radar, PNT, position, navigation, timing, basically GPS backup, electronic warfare. I mean, there's a whole host of capabilities that this constellation can offer, and there's applications that we haven't thought of yet, right? And so that's when it's like NVIDIA too, where it's like for the people who are, I guess, who can't think outside the box, they just see the applications that are right in front of their face, but then they can't extrapolate that and see what else is out there that can grow the TAM, right? And so for that type of situation, I remember like back in, what was it, 2021, when I was on ISS Discord and people were talking about Palantir, and I had no idea what Palantir was doing, like what it meant, like what is Palantir, like I didn't understand the business model or what value they were adding, and so I was lazy. I just didn't do any work on it. But of course, like for the people that did, they were highly rewarded. And so, and for Tesla, like the bears have been like, oh, it's another auto company, it should be valued like Ford and GM, but it's like, no, they're not. They're doing, it's not just electric cars, but they're doing robo taxis, which is, that's going to eat into Uber and Lyft and these other services. And then of course, like today, you just had Musk say that they're going to stop production of the S and X Tesla vehicles, and they're going to allocate that production line to building the robots by the end of this year. Now, obviously, like if that actually happens, we'll see. But Tesla is much more than just cars. It's of course they're investing, what is it, $2 billion into XAI. And so, and if you talk to like people who are really close to Tesla, there's all these other things that the company's doing that, candidly, I don't follow Tesla that closely. Like I'm just not aware. And so, for a layperson, they just think of Tesla as one particular thing and that's it. And similarly, that's true for AST, where I think most people from the outside look in, they're like, oh, those guys are doing something with their mobile phone. And that's it. And it's like, no, there's actually these massive defense markets. And then you can think about AST as just this big communications platform that sits out in space. And then over the past, 2 months, like for people really digging, it's like, okay, well, if you like data centers, then you're going to love AST. It's like, the satellite can generate 120 kilowatts of power. It's got the phased array, or the microns, which house the phased array on the bottom earth facing side, and solar panels on the outer facing side. It has built-in heat dissipation, which is like one of the biggest issues for AI data centers. And of course, in each micron, you have FPGAs currently, but ASICs that are being integrated in the first quarter. But then you could see, NVIDIA GPUs or TPUs, Tensor TPUs or other ASICs for data applications. And so this is the type of stuff where the people who really understand the potential of the company and the IP that they've built, it goes beyond just communications. And the military has recognized this, and they understand that. And the company understands this too. It's like, okay, we're at 500,000 square feet of production capacity or manufacturing floor space, we're looking for even more. And so we're going to be ramping from 6 satellites per month, which they haven't publicly acknowledged that, but of course in recent filings we know that they're already there. But then Scott has talked about getting that to 10 satellites to 12 satellites per month. So why do you need the extra satellites? Like, okay, you're going to pull forward the mid-band constellation, but there's also this idea of a government shell, which he's talked about. And so these are all little nuggets, right? And it helps the story move beyond just what the general public sees, right? And so that's where this whole idea of what Mac was saying is that reaching S class or S rank, where it's the company is not getting it's going beyond just getting credit for the core business, but it's for the extra stuff that's going to happen, like these other markets, which eventually, quite candidly, like could become bigger than the core market, right? It's like the NVIDIA example of, oh, we're just like a niche GPU company for gamers, and then all of a sudden, a few years later, they are the heart and the core of the AI revolution. It's like NVIDIA chips, right? Like, who would have thought? Like, if you'd asked somebody, I mean, Jensen Huang probably knew, but if you had asked someone 15, 20 years ago, oh yeah, these graphic cards that you're using to play Civilization or Quake or Doom, like, it's actually those chips are going to be optimized to run inference and training and various AI applications. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, that when talking about AST SpaceMobile, I've seen like a few bear posts where people are like, oh, it's trading at so many multiples to $14 million of revenue, which they reported last quarter. It's like, who are you? Like, what? Nobody who is a serious investor invests based off of historic results, right? Everyone's always looking for future results or future potential. Future results meaning if a company's already established and maybe I'm looking at next year's revenue projections and earnings, or maybe 2 years out, or if it's for, let's take smart modular reactors or quantum computers, like you're looking at these things more like biotech companies, right? Where you're looking at the TAM, you're seeing how much could they potentially capture in 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years, and then discounting that back by some high discount rate. But that's how people invest, right? Like if a company's got a lot of promise, but for AST, for example, we've got Scotiabank, who is the bear on the street, who's projecting like $11 billion of free cash flow. His numbers are kind of nuts. I think it's like by 2030 or 2031. Someone astutely pointed out that would put AST in the top 10 of all public companies in terms of free cash flow generation. But that's, that is like that's what we're going for, right? Like for AST in particular, it's not just commercial markets, it's defense, it's like first responder stuff. And then it's also these other applications that we haven't even thought about, right? Like going back to the AI data center idea, like that in particular, like we're going to have all the satellite production capacity ramped up. And once the constellation is done, like, yeah, you're going to need to build a few satellites here and there for maintenance. But all that production and know-how and trained people and automation and patents and basically all the key building blocks of what you need to make a 5-6 ton satellite that's going to do AI applications out in space, right? We're going to have it, and it's going to be there. And we have a partnership with Google currently, and Google is working. And this is not a knock on Planet. Great, like they're going to send up one NVIDIA GPU in probably like a Planet bus, and they're going to specialize it, that satellite so it can handle handle thermal load and dissipate the heat and do all that stuff to power it. But these are like tiny CubeSats, right? And so when it comes time to, once they figure out what they want to do, like who are they going to go to? Google does not make satellites, and they could go to a Prime, they could go to a Lockheed Martin or one of these other guys, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, man, we'll do that for you for cost plus, and we're going to the way that we work, we'll deliver that satellite to you in 1 to 2 years, and then maybe most likely that'll be like 3 to 4 years. And anytime you want to change, you have a change in the order, like you're going to pay us for it, and it's going to take a lot of turnaround time. Versus like AST, where it's a startup, you have that startup culture, and a company like Google or Amazon or Blue Origin, Microsoft, whoever it is, they could come to the company and say, hey, I want to do this and I need your help. And the company will be like, hey, sure. Like we've got capacity and we can do it. And, I'm not sure what the business model would be if it would be a one and done thing where we build that satellite for them, a constellation, and then we hand it over, or we're actually, ideally they pay you for it and then you would have some ongoing service revenues. Which you probably, for those companies, you probably need an operator to, for command and control and to manage constellation, because, you have to be pretty active in terms of collision avoidance and making sure that everything's running smoothly. Again, for these companies, like they're not, that's not their bread and butter. So, anyway, but yeah, I'm realizing that it's 12:07. I'm going to end it there. But yeah, I just wanted to get people together. I haven't talked about AST exclusively in quite some time. And so I wanted to do that, especially in light of us hitting this big milestone in terms of stock price. I do think that we are at this point where, we're going to have drawdowns, and maybe the stock goes back to 100 at some point, but it's not going back to 50. And so, if you look at like the strength of it, I know Kook and Tut were like, "Oh, it seems very strong today. Why is that?" I do think that there is more institutional buying. Obviously, we've seen short interest come down quite a bit, and so we're kind of at the inflection point. Like this is the year. You've got tailwinds of the administration being focused on this. You've got Golden Dome. And then, of course, the company calloused on their own, right? The launching of satellites, the launch of commercial operations and service, beta test, and then, of course, full commercial service. You also have any number of things, whether it's more definitive agreements. We just saw yesterday, Viasat got $188 million XM loan from U.S. government, an XM loan to build one satellite. And so, we do have our application for $500 million, and I'm not sure if that will be for satellites or it will be for manufacturing. But either way, like I think that's going to be, or that's probably somewhat ripe. Like we should hear back on that. But yeah, there's a lot of catalysts that are coming, and so I think the strength in the stock is reflective of that. And there's people, there was actually. There's one, I got to look and see if I can find it, but there's one institutional investor that's on Twitter that writes quite a bit. And he had written, this is like back at 105 or 104 or something like that. And he had written that he had bought stock, and someone was like, why'd you buy stock? And he's like, oh yeah, I VWAPed stock over the day. And they're like, why'd you buy it? It's like at an all-time high. And his response is like, oh, it's interesting now. Like I got to own it. And this is a concept. I'll end it with this. I was talking to Kook about it this evening, where when the company is now, you just look at this market cap. Company is now at $45 billion in market cap, and you have TMT investors who are waiting anxiously for the SpaceX IPO, and obviously they want a piece of Starlink. But there's this other company where, is a technological leader and has this big opportunity, and it's a pure play way to play this particular market. It's going to be something that people will need to own. And if they miss it, they're going to be in big trouble, right? And so they're going to, and I think that's what we're seeing now, where you're seeing pretty strong buying in the company. And that's only going to increase with FCC approval of, the market application for the company. And then, of course, as the constellation launches, I can't tell you like what it is specifically for each long only, but let's say someone's waiting for the constellation to get to 20 or 25 and for initial commercial service to start. And so that's the day that they start pressing the buy button, or maybe it's the FCC application getting approved. And so there's all these things that are going to happen over the course of the year where you're going to have people coming in to buy the stock, because as someone who's focused on TMT, or if you're tech or growth or whatever it is, right? Like this is a company you can't miss, or you're going to look like a complete idiot. Right. And so it's almost like, it's like we joke about schmuck insurance. It's like, oh, I need to own some part of this. And it's why, like, heading into the end of quarters, you'll see like some big winners spike even more, because people don't want to look like they missed it. They missed a name. And so into quarter end buying, like some losers, by the way, will drop even more, because people are like, I don't want this to be on my books. And people to know, like, I lost money on this thing. And vice versa, like if there's big winners, they don't want to miss it. And so we're at this point where that's starting to happen, and I think it will continue to happen. So yeah, I'll end it with that. I mean, the next few months are going to be very interesting, as I said before, because of all these ingredients, macro and company specific. The stock has the potential to perform or outperform, higher than even what you or I expect. And so I think that's potentially in the cards. And it's what, Kevin Mack was referring to, where you have this, the company elevates to this level that's special, that it doesn't, it's not hindered by traditional valuation metrics. And people really are investing on the potential of the core business, but all these other things that the market is not seeing, but that you and I see. So anyway, I'll end it there. I'm going to try to go to bed at a reasonable time, although I am tempted to potentially go to bed late and see if I can replicate the what happened yesterday. I am wearing the same clothes to go to bed, so maybe it'll happen. But anyway, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see what happens. I'm sure we'll catch up again when the next catalyst drops. So thanks everyone for joining, and have a good night. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the AST SpaceMobile podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest news about AST SpaceMobile, make sure to subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.
We're doing something very, very big. And I think with this technology, we can really affect billion lives.
AST SpaceMobile is the only company that has proven technology to deliver cellular broadband connectivity directly from space to your everyday smartphone.
People will just basically turn their phone and be seamless, regardless of where you are. We don't want the user even to know that it's connected by satellite. Our role is to bring this into reality, always in partnership with the MNOs.
Listen. Waffles.